Before we start the Sicha, I think it's just important to mention a theme that's going to be very relevant to the whole Sicha, is that as it's explained in Chassidus, brought from many earlier Sfarim, is that every single thing in the world is made up of the four elements of Eish, Mayim, Ruach, and Afor. That is fire, water, air, and dust, or earth. In addition to this, it's explained in the Sfarim and brought in Chassidus, that even before you have these particular four elements, which make up every single thing in the world, and everything is made up of each one of these four things, there's also something called the Chomer Hiyuli. There's like a formless matter, which doesn't have any sort of shape, form, description, which every single thing, including these four, are made up or come from this original Chomer Hiyuli, this original formless matter, which we could call the essence of every single thing. In other words, even deeper than these four Yesoidos, these four elements. And now to the Sicha. Says the Rebbe, in regards to the Makos that Hashem brought on Mitzrayim, there's a machloikes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer says that each one of the Makos was really made up of four Makos. Each Makkah really consisted of four Makos. Rabbi Akiva says that each Makkah was made up of five Makos. What is really the point of this machloikas? What is really behind these two opinions, whether each Makkah was made up of four or each Makkah was made up of five? So the Kolboy, in the name of the Baal HaMelamed, explains it in the following way, that Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that the Makkos permeated all four elements of the particular item in which the Makkah was taking place. Which means to say that the Makkah was not only in the particular item as it is already made up of all four elements and has the shape and form that it currently has, but rather the Makkah reached even deeper, even into the essence of each one of these four elements. And that's why every Makkah is made up of four, attacking or striking each one of these four elements. For example, the Makkah of Dam, which came to strike the water, but it wasn't only striking the water as it's already in the shape and form of water the way we have it, but rather also the Eish, Ruach, Afor, also the fire, the air, the dust that's within the water. So that's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Rabbi Akiva takes it one step further. He says that the Makkah was also striking the Chomer Hiyuli of the thing. In other words, again, that shapeless form, which is completely removed, doesn't even have any of the forms yet of the four Yesoidos. And this is why he says that the Makkah was made up of five, because it struck the four Yesoidos, but went even deeper into the very, very essence of the thing, the Chomer Hiyuli. Says the Rebbe, the point of the Makkos, as the name implies, it came to strike, to break, to crush Mitzrayim. From this we understand that this idea that the Makkos permeated all of every single item, but also down into its basic elements, and is number one, according to both opinions, it's not only the item as it is seen, the visible item, but rather it also went into the deeper aspects of the item, into the essence of the item. And number two, says the Rebbe, the two opinions in the way we look at it, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, whether it also permeated the very essence, the Chomer Hiyuli, into that formless matter, or it's only as it already has some sort of shape and form of the four Yesoidos. What are these things based on? It's all based on how they view to what extent the Tumah of Mitzrayim actually penetrated and permeated things, which in accordance to that amount, that's how much the Makkos now need to deal with to strike and to nullify this Tumah. Says the Rebbe, this idea that the Tumah of Mitzrayim reached in deeper than just what you see in front of you, but rather into the essence of the matters, says the Rebbe, is also expressed. This machloikas is also expressed, like all matters of Haggadah and Pnimiyas HaTorah, is also expressed in Nigla the Torah and all the way to the area of Halacha. And that is in how we view the Isur of Chametz, which of course the Isur of Chametz is all as a result of the Tumah of Mitzrayim, and therefore the way we just explained what's happening with the Tumah of Mitzrayim is also going to have bearing on what happens and how we view what happens by Chametz. The Isur of Chametz, as we know, is not only that you're not allowed to eat it, it's not only you're not allowed to derive pleasure from it, but there's also the concept of Bal Yiro, Bal Yimatzeh. You're not allowed to, it's not allowed to be seen, it's not allowed to be found in one's possession. And as a result of this, that also brings with it the obligation of Bir Chametz, that we must destroy the Chametz. So in regards again to the Isur of Chametz, we have three things. It's not allowed to be eaten, we're not allowed to have benefit from it, and Bal Yira and Bal Yimatzeh, it's not allowed to even be seen and found in our properties, which is therefore again the idea that it needs to be destroyed. What are these three ideas? So when we look at the concept of eating or the prohibition of eating, this is when we're looking at the food as it is already in its full form of an item of food, that it's roi lachila, that's edible. We're not looking at as it is in a pure matter for itself without a shape and form yet. In other words, we're not looking at the very, very essence, what's deeper down behind the food. On the other hand, when we speak about hana, the idea of deriving pleasure or the prohibition of deriving pleasure means that now this isur has also gone down to the very, very essence of this particular thing, not only in its shape and form, the way it's right now, ready for food. The Rebbe says, in fact, this will be one of the explanations how it even makes sense that you can have something that's asur ba'achila, you're not allowed to eat it, but it's mutar b'hana, you are allowed to derive pleasure from it. Because seemingly, if this is something that's ra, that's evil, that's prohibited, how is it possible to have hana from this? But the explanation is this same point that we were just mentioning. The isur achila, the prohibition of eating, means that the ra, the negativity, is only on the form, on the chitzonius, on the external part of the item. In other words, that which is making it right now completely edible, the way it's right now an edible item. And therefore we say, because the ra didn't go deeper than that level, so it's mutar b'hana, we're allowed to have pleasure from it, because if we're speaking about the very matter itself or the essence of it, which that's what we might be deriving pleasure from it. Not, in other words, we're not having the pleasure from eating it, we're having some other sort of pleasure from it. At that level, the ra didn't penetrate. So we have these two levels so far. Eating, which is on the external form, and hana, which is related to deeper than the external form. Says the Rebbe, but even hana, even deriving pleasure, or the prohibition of deriving pleasure, since it's still connected with having some sort of use of the item, and that is, the item obviously has, this matter has some sort of form, some sort of format. Therefore, that itself shows that it also is connected already. The isur is also connected to the matter as it has some sort of tzir, some sort of particular form. Whereas by chametz, what do we say? In addition to this, we have the isur that we're not even allowed to own the chametz, without even using the chametz at all. It's not even if we don't use it, we're not allowed to own it. That means the isur had penetrated so deeply into the essence of the item, even as it is, so to speak, divested of any sort of form. And this is why the actual existence of this chametz in our possession is also because the isur had and the negativity had penetrated so deeply into this item. So now let's have a look at the mitzvah of bir chametz. We're not allowed to own the chametz, and we have to get rid of the chametz. So we actually have a machloikas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion, ein bir chametz elos reifa. The only way to deal with chametz, to get rid of the chametz, is we have to burn it. The Chachamim say, we don't have to necessarily burn it. Mefarer v'zoyre l'ruach, we could crumble it and throw it into the wind, or throw it into the ocean. What is the machloikas? The Ragachover explains the reason for this machloikas, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we need to get rid of the very, very essence of the chametz itself, and therefore we need to burn it. Because if we are just going to crumble it and scatter it and so on, the essence of that chametz is technically still around. Whereas the Chachamim say, The Chachamim are of the opinion that it's enough that we are just nullifying, we're getting rid of the form of the chametz as it is in its current form. In other words, we're taking away the ability that a person should be able to eat it or derive pleasure from it. And that is being accomplished also if I'm just crumbling it and scattering it. And therefore it's also understood that in other words, this idea of how I need to go and get rid of it is all dependent on the same point. To what extent the isur of the chametz had penetrated into the particular item. If the isur had penetrated, had gone in all the way to the very, very core essence, then we need to get rid of it to the extent that the whole chametz, the very essence of it, is completely destroyed. Whereas if the isur only touched its shape and form, the way it's right now, an edible item, so then it would be enough to get rid of the form of it. In other words, the ability to eat it and to derive pleasure from it. We don't have to bother with the very, very essence because there the isur never touched. Says the Rebbe, this now fits very much with the two opinions that we explained from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva in regards to the makos. Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that every makkah again was made up of 4 makos, which we said means that the makos were, as each item has already at least the 4 yisodos, it has already that form made up of the Eishmayim, Ruach, and Afor. And that would fit with the sheet of the Chachamim that say that it's enough to crumble it, to scatter it to the wind. We just have to destroy the metzius of chametz as it is, connected to some sort of form already of chametz, which in other words would be the ability to be able to eat it and derive pleasure from it. Whereas Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that every makkah consisted of 5 makkos. The makos also had to strike the very, very essence, the chomer hiyuli. And that's because he is of the opinion, like Rabbi Yehuda, that ein bir chametz ala sreifa, that the only way of getting rid of chametz is by absolutely burning it, getting rid of the essence. Says the Rebbe, similar to these two ideas of how one needs to burn the chametz, in regards to the actual metzius of the chametz, whether the Torah was actually asering, prohibiting the very, very essence of the metzius, even as it has absolutely no shape and form. Or the metzius, as it already has some sort of title, some sort of form, it is already roi lahano, we could have some sort of pleasure from it. Says the Rebbe, we could actually take it a step further, that even within the isur hano itself, which as we said, shows how deep the ra had gone, that it's even deeper than just the description of it, just the title and form of it. So here too, there's 2 ways of understanding this. Or there's two ways of looking at it. We're going to see another machloikas now. The Rebbe says like this. There is a hana that brings and is in some way still related to eating. Because, as the Rebbe quotes, stam hanois lidei achiloheim bois. Usually pleasure is going to lead to some form of eating, because you're deriving pleasure from it. You're going to be getting money, for example. You sold it, you're getting money, and then with this money you could buy food. So in other words, in a broader sense, every single hana that a person has, some sort of benefit from it, there's always any sort of benefit is some way going to be related to this idea that's related to food and so on and so forth. So that's one way of understanding of what type of hana we're not allowed to have. Then there's another type of use that a person has, where there's absolutely no sort of benefit or gain at all. So for example, says the Rebbe, one's going to take the isur and he's going to give it to dogs of hefker, which means to say it doesn't even belong to him. He doesn't even have to feed the dog. So he has absolutely no benefit at all out of it whatsoever. So in the Yerushalmi, there's actually a machloikas, whether one is allowed to give chametz to these dogs of hefker. So one opinion would hold that it's mutar, it's allowed. And then there's another opinion that says that from the pasuk v'lo yachal chametz, we actually learn out it's coming to include something. It's coming also to prohibit the use of feeding chametz even to dogs of hefker. Says the Rebbe, so we can explain that this machloikas is again going into the question, related to the question, to what extent the isur of chametz is connected with the very, very essence of the matter of the thing. If we say the isur is only on yes, it's on the essence of the thing, but only as far as it's connected to some sort of shape and form, some sort of description. Then that would mean that the Isur Hano, which is connected, yes, it is connected with the Etzem, but it's still only limited to those sorts of pleasures that at least have some sort of connection to food. It's going to bring ultimately to eating. But if we say that the Isur is literally on the very, very essence, even as it's removed from any sort of shape and form and title, and any sort of description, any sort of format, then we would say that the Isur Hano is an Isur on its own that includes any type of use of the chametz, even if it's not going to lead to any sort of achila whatsoever. The Rebbe points out, as an additional point, that based on this whole way of looking at it, we can now explain that we know that there's also another opinion. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, we quoted Rabbi Eliezer and we quoted Rabbi Akiva, but Rabbi Yossi Aglila's opinion is brought in the Mechilta before these two opinions, and he says, Minayin, how do we know that the Egyptians in Mitzrayim had 10 makos? Which means that there was only 10 makos, not like Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are arguing that it was made up of each one of 4 or 5, etc. And on the Yam, there was 50 makos, etc. That is, because Rabbi Yossi, according to in his shita, is that actually chametz is permissible b'hano. Again, we were explaining the whole idea of Isur Hano means because it went down into the inner layers, the deeper layers of the item. But according to Rabbi Yossi, that he's saying that it's mutar b'hano is because according to him, the Isur of the chametz is only in the outer part of it, in the current format as it is, which basically shows that the Tumah of Mitzrayim only touch the very external aspects of matters. And therefore, when it comes to the makos as well, each makkah is only as the particular item is already made up of all the 4 elements, etc., in its 100% full format. Says the Rebbe, based on what we explained, that the machloikas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is dependent on to what extent the Tumah of Mitzrayim permeated Mitzrayim and everything in it, we could also explain the reason why we have 2 different opinions in the Medrash regarding the Daled Golius. In other words, there's often a discussion about 4 Goliyos, 4 Golusin. But the question is which nations, which governments are counted as part of these 4 Goliyos. So in most places, Golus Mitzrayim is not counted as part of these 4 kingdoms or Goliyos. And the reason is, what it says is because Shakul Kikulam, because Mitzrayim weighs equal to all of them and more than them, and that's why it's not mentioned together with them, because it is way greater and than all the other Goliyos. On the other hand, there are places where Mitzrayim is enumerated and counted as the first of the 4 Goliyos, 4 Malchios and Goliyos. How do we understand this? Is it part of the 4 or is it not part of the 4? Says the Rebbe, these 2 opinions are connected with this idea that we were speaking about, and this machloikas, to what extent the Tumah of Mitzrayim permeated Mitzrayim. To explain. The reason why Mitzrayim is in most places not mentioned together with the others, with the other 4 Malchios and Golios, in other words, it's counted as something separate, is because the 4 Malchios and the 4 Golios correspond and are opposing the 4 Oisios of Shem Havaya. Golus Mitzrayim goes beyond that. It corresponds to the little koitz, the little thorn or the little tip on top of the yud. It's known also that the 4 Yesoidos, which we spoke about earlier in the Sicha, the 4 elements, they are also corresponding to the 4 Oisios of Shem Havaya. And the koitzei shel yud, that tip on top of the yud, which in the spheros would represent the sphere of Keser, this would be, if the 4 Oisios are like the 4 Yesoides, the tip of the yud is representing what we were discussing before, that formless matter that we call the Hiyuli. So in other words, the 4 Goliyos correspond to the 4 Yesoides, and Golus Mitzrayim, we're saying, here there was touched a much deeper place, even into the Chomer Hiyuli, even into that deepest essence. So that's the Maimori Razal that are saying Mitzrayim cannot be counted to the other 4. The 4 are the 4 Yesoides. Mitzrayim is way beyond that. On the other hand, the Maimori Razal, where Mitzrayim is mentioned amongst the 4 Malchios, is going according to the opinion that Mitzrayim is one of the 4 when we speak about the 4 letters of Hashem's name, or in the Spheros, it would be the Sphira of Chachma. Now, even though, of course, this opinion also is that Mitzrayim is the root of all of the Goliaths, but it's the kind of root that's already connected with and includes the other Goliaths. In other words, not completely removed. In other words, this is the opinion that says that Klipas Mitzrayim is only affecting that matter the way it's already in the form of the 4 Yesodis. So Mitzrayim is, because there's the 4 Yesodis, according to this opinion, we didn't go deeper into the essence. So Mitzrayim is also one of the 4 Yesodis. That's exactly what's happening in Mitzrayim. Even in Mitzrayim, we didn't go further than those 4. So this is the way we explain these 2 opinions based on the same machloikas we had before. Now the Rebbe turns to Avodah. Says the Rebbe, the idea of Golus and Yetzias Mitzrayim also applies in the spiritual Avodah of a Yid. Mitzrayim, as we know, is from the word Meitzorim Ugvulim, limitations, boundaries and limitations. Golus Mitzrayim means that the Avodah of a Yid is with a certain limit, with a certain Gvul, Medida v'Hagbala, limitations. Yetzias Mitzrayim means he's going out in his Avodah of all limitations, even the limitations of the Nefesh Olikis. And here again we have this machloikas between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Whether the Makos were only in the 4 Yesodos, or also in the Chomer Hiyuli in the very essence, which in Ruchnius would mean whether we need the Avodah of Yetzias Mitzrayim only in our 10 faculties of the Nefesh, which are often generally divided into the 4 groups. The 10 koiches will be divided into 4 groups, as we'll soon see what they are, and they will correspond to the 4 oisius of Shem Havaya. And those are, number 1, you have the first group is Avodah B'Poil in Machshava Dibur U'Maisa, which would be the sphere of Malchus. The Rebbe doesn't specify over here, but that would be like the Hey of Hashem's name, the second Hey. Then we have a step up is in the Midos, which correspond in the spheres that's called Zoz, Eiranpin. Number 3, that would be the Vav of Hashem's name. Number 3, you have the Seichel, or generally the idea of Bina, which would be the first Hey of Hashem's name. And finally, the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. So this is one way of looking at the Yetzias Mitzrayim needs to be in these 4 areas. In other words, there could be issues in these 4 areas, and we need to have a Yetzias Mitzrayim in these 4 areas. That's one opinion. The other opinion is, no, we need to go a step further even, and we need to have a Yetzias Mitzrayim even in the area of Yechidah Shabbat, which is similar to that Chomer Hiyuli. How do we understand this? So Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that every makkah is made of 4 makkahs. That means the avoid of Yetzias Mitzrayim needs to be in these 4 groups, these 4 general categories of what we call the koiches hanefesh, the revealed faculties of the soul. We need to go out of the limitations in each and every one of these. And the Rebbe goes through all 4 stages. The lowest thing would be is when a person has those limitations in his milchama with the Yetzer Hara, which is causing him to be over Rachman Litzlan in his actions, or even in his speech and his thoughts, but in other words, in practical, in something of an Aveira. Or at least in those Yisurim which really demand a very, very big battle and challenge, he's not managing, he's having a difficulty over there. So that's one area where he could be having a problem, and he needs to have a Yetzias Mitzrayim. Get out of those limitations of where the Yetzer Hara is causing me problems. That's step number 1. That's like the lowest of the 4 Yesodos. That's the idea we said, like Malchus or Maisa. Then we have a more subtle idea of Mitzrayim. And here we have a person that, although on the one hand, he's definitely absolutely cautious and careful not to be over any sort of Isser. Not even a small Isser Medivrei Soifrim. But nevertheless, his general conduct, his general approach in matters of heter and permissible things, because he's definitely not doing any Isurim, but it's still in a way that he always is making sure that it should fit with the Hanachas Oilam, with the attitudes, with the approaches, with the mindset of the world. In other words, by every single thing, he's still very concerned. What are people going to say? How are people going to look at it? This sort of conduct is because there's some sort of limitations. He's having some difficulties in the area of his midos. He's limited based on the feeling of the world around him. In other words, in his midos, he's concerned. He's thinking about, and he cares about what's everybody around me thinking about what I'm doing. Then we have step number 3. This is going to be the area of seichel. Says the Rebbe, even if someone left already those limitations about what the world around him is thinking and saying, But there could still be some sort of limitations of one's own mitzias, meaning to say he's still limited based on his own tam vadas, on his own logic and reason, with the cold apathy sometimes that's associated, or the coldness of reason and logic. So there's still a certain limitation based on the idea of seichel. So that's step number 3. And then we have step number 4, the highest area, according to Rabbi Eliezer, because then we're going to see according to Rabbi Akiva, we need to go even further. The highest level that we need to make sure that there's Yetzias Mitzrayim, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is in the avodah that's associated with Chachma already. Now, Chachma is the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh. And yet, even over here, there could be an issue. So here we could be speaking about a person that now he's serving Hashem already higher than Tam Vadas, higher than logic and reason, but there's still some sort of limitation. The Rebbe gives an example, a story that the Frierdiker Rebbe told about someone that was saying Kriya Shema, and while saying Kriya Shema, he was being Meirich, he was thinking at Ba'arichos about Echad, about Hashem Echad, he was being Mizboinen in Echad, and later he commented that his Hizboinenus was, he had a Hizboinenus in Echad just almost a minute, almost a full minute he was thinking about the Hizboinenus in Echad. So on the one hand, he's having a deep Hizboinenus in Echad, which is all about the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, and at the very same time, he's looking at the clock, figuring out the time, how long is he standing in this tenuah of Mesiras Nefesh. So in other words, it's Mesiras Nefesh, but still with some sort of limitation. Or to put this in even a more subtle way, says the Rebbe, you could have a situation, you could have a person that's having Mesiras Nefesh, but he still has the feeling that I am having Mesiras Nefesh, which shows that he didn't leave all of the limitations of his Metzias yet, because it's still about the I am having Mesiras Nefesh. This is all Rabbi Eliezer. These are the 4 stages where you have to have Yetzias Mitzrayim. Again, these 4 stages corresponding to the 4 Yesoides and the 4 letters of Hashem Havaya, etc. Comes along Rabbi Akiva and says that every makkah actually consisted of 5 makkahs. There's a step deeper that could be a problem still. But the Rebbe first goes back to Rabbi Eliezer to explain who Rabbi Eliezer is and why Rabbi Akiva is going to have a different opinion. The word Eliezer, in this our case Rabbi Eliezer, of course, we have this name in Chumash. Moshe Rabbeinu says he's so called because Elekei Avi Be'ezri, the Eibishter Hashem of my father is helping me. So Rabbi Eliezer is a person that has a Yiddish father. He's Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, and it goes further and further back. All Yidden. He's a ben Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, and he has, as we said, Elekei Avi Be'ezri. He has Hashem's help, and therefore to Rabbi Eliezer, it wouldn't make sense, it's not possible that anything could go all the way to the core essence of the Yid. Yes, in these various different koiches we said, fine, there could be a certain limitation. But we're speaking about the core essence, there definitely nothing could go wrong over there. Because as it says, even b'sha'as achet, even when a person is doing a sin, the very essence of the neshama is always dedicated to Hashem. Is always faithful to Hashem. But Rabbi Akiva comes from Geirim. And he is talking about, and he is trying to make sure, take care of, even those people that need to be brought, tachas kanfei Hashchina, that need to be brought to Hashem. Or on a more subtle level, says the Rebbe, there's the avodah that's known as mikfirim yichidosi. This is a pasuk in Tehillim. But as it's explained in Chassidus, what it means is that even the yechida could sometimes be in trouble. Even the deepest level of the nefesh could sometimes be in trouble, and we need to save it. The avodah of fixing even the etzem nefesh. And that's why he speaks about this 5th level. Says the Rebbe, but because of this itself, we have now the advantage on the other extreme, that dafka as a result of this, there's the Yetzias Mitzrayim, even of this level. In other words, we go out of all limitations that could even be over the etzem nefesh, because we're reaching the very, very deepest essence of the Nefesh Elikis, which has absolutely no limitations whatsoever. And that brings the Yetzias Mitzrayim into all the levels, and to finally finishing it off, the Yetzias Mitzrayim of all the limitations of this last Golus Begashmius, Kimei Tzeis Chamei Eretz Mitzrayim Aren Neflois.